Howdy, this is Terry Fair from Vorshlag, and I've got a short video to show why we're doing a J-swap in this 2013 FRS. We made a post earlier this week about a Honda J37 liter V6 that we want to swap into this first gen 86. And we got a lot of questions, and good ones too. And I wanted to give you a quick video to explain why we picked the engine we did, the transmission we're using, and why we're building this in the first place. Why is this little J-Series V6 so popular? The Honda world has known about this engine for almost 30 years. It came out in 1996. It's been put in tens of millions of cars and even minivans. The latest variants, the J37 3.7 liters, make between 300 and 305 horsepower in completely stock form, and that's important for this race car, and I'll explain. The most unusual thing about this little V6 is it's very lightweight and it's very small. It's a very narrow, short, front to back, top to bottom. This one we weighed with the everything you see here plus the manifold was 307 pounds. And that's really light for a V6. This is a single overhead cam, so there's only one camshaft per cylinder head. So 2 cams, 24 valves, and it makes for a much narrower package than, let's say, the 3.5 liter 2GR Toyota. Is much wider, heavier, bigger, more camshaft, more costs, and more weight than this for not that much more power. There's a VQ series 3.5, 3.7 liter that we could have used for the racing class we're building for from Nissan. Again, those are bigger, heavier, and not enough more power to be worth the swap. This is a 2013 Scion FRS. Just call it an 86, first gen. We bought this car in 2016. My wife and I tested with it, raced with it for 2 years, had a lot of fun. The F820s are very underwhelming. The flat 4 Subaru engines are big. They're fully 31 inches wide, which is why this car has such a massive engine bay and why we're able to put V8s in these cars so easily. The thinking behind using that engine was because they already made it. But that engine was made for front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive cars. And this is really the only rear-wheel drive car that they put it in. And it's not really set up for that. It has a starter on the back of the block and some other things they kept because they didn't want to make something super unique to this chassis because this is a fairly low-volume car. They sell a few thousand of these a year. It's not like a huge seller. But it's a very popular car, and it tracks very well because it's light. This car, when we bought it, weighed 2,634 pounds with all the trunk junk removed, and that's exceptionally light by today's standards. It's fully 1,000 pounds lighter than the Mustang of that era, lighter than the Hyundai Genesis, lighter than almost anything else out there except for maybe the Miata, and it was really close to what an NC Miata weighs. One of the big advantages of this car is it's got a really wide track width, and with increasing track width, you increase lateral grip. It's just a mechanical thing. It's just physics. Even with the tiny little 215 tires on this car, it makes a lot of grip. And we have 315s all the way around on this car and even 335s in the back, so it makes even more grip. We took this car off the road in 2018 and used it for development of our production LS swap kit we make for the 86 chassis. We finished our first LS swap in 2015, only 2 years after the car came out. It was one of the first swaps. Our production headers had some issues, so we had to come back and redo that with a different company, and we use this car for that. So we've pulled the engine out, we've made some modifications to the subframe and the tunnel that make it easier to swap in the big V8 and a T56 Magnum XL, which is a monster 128-pound transmission. But we needed that XL version, the 3 links of the Tremec, because the distance between the firewall and the shifter was so long that we needed the longest Tremec that's made that's a direct shift. And so that's one of the challenges of this car is finding a transmission that works for the firewall to shifter location. This J-Series engine comes in 3 liter, 3.2, 3.5, and 3.7 liter variants. The older they are, the smaller the displacement is. And Honda learned this in many cars, including the S2000, to make more horsepower, you make the displacement bigger internally. The 2 liter S2000 became a 2.2 liter. And the K24 is a derivative of that that's even bigger. And the reliability goes up if you keep the horsepower the same, or the horsepower goes up if you keep the RPMs the same. That's pretty much how physics works. So the 3.7 liter is what's attractive to us because we have to keep the long block stock. That means the internal engine components, the block, the heads have to be completely stock. You can have an OE style rebuild, but you can't have any tricks there. We are allowed to change the intake manifold, and we can port that and change that. We can change the water pump, we can change the oil pan and oil pump. But that's about it. Everything internally has to be stock. Valve springs, the valves. No, you can't add boost, we can't add a supercharger, we can't bore it and stroke it and rev it to the moon. These are fairly robust engines for the horsepower they make, because it's a fairly big displacement engine, even though it's based on the same architecture as the 3-liter early versions, the J37, and we're going to use the J37 A1. It has the least amount of nonsense. Some of the later engines had displacement on demand, they had VTEC on both the intake and exhaust valves, and that led to some reliability issues. So these J37s tend to come out of minivans and SUVs, so they're pretty robust, but they're not like completely neutered like an American LS truck engine, which has just inferior valve train. It's made only to make torque. This actually makes it the most power of all the factory J-series engines, except for the supercharged one, which again, we cannot use in this class. Okay, this is our 95 BMW M3, and it's built for a class in SCCA Time Trial called Max 5. There's Max 1 through 5. This is the slowest Max class. A lot of the 86s will run in Max 5 if you go to that category. There's basically 4 categories. We have Sport, we have Tuner, we have Max, and Unlimited. We've built stuff for Tuner, Max, and Unlimited, and we really like the Max class. It allows us to do things we're good at, like the aero treatment we have up front, big wheels and tires. There's no limit on tire width, which is kind of cool. Unlike NASA, which limits tire width for each class, this has an unlimited tire width, and we run a 315 tire all the way around on this car. Even though this was a radial barn find with a 3-liter engine. It's the biggest engine we can run in Max, and it makes, I think it made 246 to the wheels on pump gas. We've got a Link ECU, which you can see here. It's a plug-and-play ECU. It's got MCS remote doubles and SBL parts on some of the arms, G-lock brake pads. Got a big brake kit from a Porsche. And inside, we have what's called a level 2 safety. So in SCCA classing, from Tuner to Max and up, you can have different levels of safety. This has a 4-point roll bar that's bolted in, and it's, some people call it a half cage, but it's just a roll bar. We use that for rollover protection and to mount the harnesses. It's got fixed back racing seats, and it's got a headliner from here forward and carpet from the roll bar forward. But otherwise, we're allowed to remove the back seat and some other excessive weight, and still have some safety. So the roll bars typically weigh between 50 and 60 pounds, and we can usually pull about that much out of the rear inner door panels or interior panels, the back seat and whatnot. And so level 2 safety is probably what we're going to build our 86 for, and we'll have something similar. We'll have a racing steering wheel with a quick connect. We'll have a fire system because we like to be safe. And we can have any transmission, any engine within reason, and I'll explain. And yeah, it lets us have a little bit more, a safer environment, a better seat so the driver's connected to the car better. And it makes for a more fun experience while still being street legal. We could technically drive this car to the track. It has roll-up windows and whatnot. This is another car we built for SCCA and NASA as well. But our SCCA classing got a little borked this year, and we got stuck in Unlimited class, which I'm not happy about. We ran this car for 3 seasons in SCCA Max, and we had the level 2 safety at one point, and then we went up to a full roll cage, and that's called level 3, and that way we can gut the doors and get some more interior out. We don't have to run carpets, we don't have to run headliner, and that's something we might do with our 86 here at some point, but initially we are going to keep the carpets, and we are going to keep the dash, full carpets, but we'll get rid of the back seat and have a 4-point roll bar. We'll make a custom bulkhead there. So now a lot of you are still wondering, why not pick a bigger engine or run a turbo or do built internals? And it comes down to classing. So in SCCA Time Trial for this Max class category, we could build this car for Max 5 up to a 3-liter engine, and we thought about using a J30. They make about 250 horsepower. And the class up from Max 5 is called Max 4, and there are several formulas you can build around, and one of the formulas we really like is between a 3-liter and 3.7-liter engine, and with a minimum weight of 2,700 pounds with driver. We can have an unmodified 3.7 Honda J37 in this car. They're fairly cheap, so you're talking like a $1,000, $1,500 engine, so kind of disposable, which is good because the J37s aren't rebuildable. They don't have a cast-in liner. It's just a plasma spray, so it's one and done. If you have to rebuild it, you're kind of out of luck. But that's okay. We don't really want to get into the internals and spend the money on a built engine, because you could spend 5, 8, 10 grand really fast and gain nothing, almost nothing on a dyno. One of the other rules we have in SCCA Max category is we can't run race fuel. We have to run pump gas. So we'll build this with 93 octane. We built the Mustang above for E85 pump, and it's making about 700 wheel horsepower with a 7.4 liter built engine in Max 1 class. So to be considered unmodified, to fit in this category at 2,700 pounds with driver, that means for me, 200-pound driver, we're gonna have to make this car 2,500 pounds. And it came stock at 2,600 pounds. So we got to lose some weight. We've actually added more weight with we had big brakes, we got coilovers, we got giant wheels, 18 by 12 rear, 1811 fronts. So we got to get some weight out. This was 2714, and I'll show that here in its final iteration with the F820 engine. Luckily, the J37 weighs the same as the F820. Yes, it's almost twice the displacement, and it's got 2 extra cylinders, and it weighs the same as this 4-cylinder. Because flat 4 opposed boxer engines are not very space efficient, and as such, they are not very weight efficient. So the weight of an engine matters. And so a lot of people are asking, why don't you use a 2GR Toyota? Why don't you use a VQ Nissan? Because they're bigger and heavier and way more. And they don't make that much more power. They're actually more costly to buy, because not many people are chasing minivan engines, but a lot of people want a 350 or 370Z engine. The Toyotas came in both front-wheel drive configuration and rear-wheel drive, and they have some problems there too with the front-wheel drive version. So the rear drive, the 2GR FSE, is a little bit harder to find, and it's just, there's a lot more that goes with it. And yes, it would be cool to have a Toyota engine in a Toyota car, but I just don't care about brands. We mix and match stuff all the time. So having a Honda engine, a Mazda transmission, and a Subaru car that's based on a lot of Toyota technology, it's great. It's a melting pot car. We don't get hung up on brands here, and that's one thing that you'll know about Vorshlag is we've LS swapped like 11 different car models. We sold hundreds of kits over the years, and a lot of people ask me, why not put an LS in this? Because then it moves it up to the same class as our Mustang, and it's really expensive. The higher you go in the Max category, the more money you spend. Every time I take that Mustang out, between tires, fuel, entry fee, and wear and tear items, it's about $2,000 a day, and that's expensive. And that's me taking maybe 4 or 5 laps, because the tires we run on get overheated really fast. The beauty of this chassis and our M3 over here is we run the exact same tires we run on this 3,600-pound Mustang that makes 700 to the wheels, the same 200 tread wear tire we put on this car, which will be 2,500 pounds, our M3, which is 2,800 pounds. And that means the big tires last a hell of a lot longer. The tires on our M3 have 21 events on them. Competitive, fast. Amy's won every single SCCA Time Trial she's gone to this year, 6 in a row. And they were 10 event old tires from the Mustang before we put them on here. So still makes 1.6G lateral with 9 lives wing and our little splitter on the front, which will do something similar on this. So I like a big tire. And all the internet myths about, oh, you'll never get it up to temperature, that's all hogwash. We've been doing this for 35 years, and we've disproven that time and time again. And this car with the F820 was the fastest in 8 timed track tests with the same driver at the same track when we put the big tires on. And it dropped 2.5 seconds going from the normal size tire that was competitive to this 315 all the way around. So, and that was an old Rival S throwaway tire. We're going to have fresh AO52 or V2 or P1X or whatever the hot tire is. In 295, 315, we'll have that all the way around. Last but not least is our transmission choice. This got a lot of grief online. This is a Tremec T56 F-body length. It's one of the 3 lengths they make in a Tremec. And honestly, that's what I wanted to use. But it's not the right length, and making the bell housing adapt from this transmission to the J motor was going to be several $1,000s of custom work. We'd have to do a custom bell housing. We couldn't find an SFI off-the-shelf steel bell housing that goes from the Gen 2 J motor to this, and we need a rear-mounted starter. That's one of the challenges of the J motor, is the starter is on the back of the engine. That's one challenge of the J Series engine, is it only came in cars mounted this way, transversely, because it was a front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive configuration only. As such, the starter, there's no space for the starter on the block because it's behind the engine. It's actually part of the transmission. And so we looked at hundreds of different manual transmissions we could use for this engine. And it's the same for the 2GR front-wheel drive, it's the same for a lot of cars. And then rotate it to be longitudinally mounted for a rear-wheel drive application. Our transmission choices shrank dramatically. It went to about 3. The S2000, the RX-8, and the actual transmission that came in this car, which, because of its weird Subaru background from being a front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive application, the starter's on the back. So our choices were very limited. Then you look at the torque rating on these transmissions. The one in the S2000, it's not super great because that wasn't a very torquey engine. It's, you know, it had about 150, 160 foot-pounds of torque in the S2000 when it came out. That's why they revved to 9,000. That's how you make horsepower with low torque, is you rev it higher. This minivan engine makes 273 foot-pounds of torque and 300 horsepower in a minivan. So that kind of guides which transmissions will last behind this in a road race format. Another challenge is the distance between the firewall and the shifter. And in this car, we need about 31 inches. And that's with the J motor shoved all the way back in the engine bay. And this little bitty engine is so short front to back that it's almost completely behind the front axle center line. And I'll show that here. So we moved the motor back about 11 inches further back towards the firewall than the FA20 that comes out of here. So the front to rear weight bias will be better. We'll have more weight on the rear wheels than the front. These cars are normally very front biased, and when you put a V8 in them, they get even worse, because the V8s we use, even though they're all aluminum, they weigh a lot. This all aluminum 6.3 liter built engine in our Fox Mustang with a Tremec TKX transmission, which is pretty light, and one of the choices we really wanted to use. That weighed about 470 pounds before the intake manifold and the alternator. So that weight goes in an 86, and a lot of it goes over the front axle because the motor really pushes far forward. It's a really wide engine bay, but it's not very long front to back. The other consideration is this subframe is really far back in the engine bay. And because of Subaru's genius, they put the steering rack and the sway bar behind the front axle center line, so it's called a rear steer, which is not advantageous, and it really makes it to where you need a front-mounted oil sump. A rear sump just wouldn't fit. The J Series oil pan, and I'll show that here, we cut 2 of the lower flanges off, and it fits in here really well with the engine shoved way back. Like a couple people can just stand in front of the engine and still fit in here. So the engine's going to go way back. Because it's in max class, we can run a tubular bumper beam, we can roll the radiator, which we've done. So we're going to make a pretty competitive car. It should make about 300 horsepower in stock form with a race exhaust and some other tricks with a link ECU we're going to use. We'll probably make 270 to the wheels, we're hoping, with the RX-8 transmission, which is our choice because the second gen RX-8 has a 400 Newton meter rating. It's about 295 foot-pounds, which is more than this will ever make. It's the only transmission we could find that made that kind of torque. The transmission that came out of this had about 220 foot-pound rating, and it's too long. The transmission bell housing to shifter length is way too long, and we'd have to do a lot of games to make it work. And the shifter being up high because it's a Subaru, because they have all this room at the back of the engine bay, that was going to be a problem. In the RX-8 transmission, the starter is really low on the driver's side, and we have plenty of room in the tunnel for that. We've already mocked this up. So we're going to make an adapter to adapt this second generation J Series bell housing, and this is the round bell housing, the later ones, the 3.5s, some of the 3.5s and all the 3.7s have this Gen 2 bell housing. The RX-8 aftermarket flywheels actually fit perfectly in here. It's the same ring gear diameter, so we can use a starter from an RX-8, mount it right to the RX-8 bell housing, and make an adapter at the crank for this 8-bolt pattern and the 6-bolt pattern on the RX-8, space it back some, and we'll make a spacer here that will also add some distance. And then our bell housing to shifter location is perfect for the 86 chassis. That way we're not making weird remote mounted shifters. We're not trying to chop up the chassis to make the shifter work or make a weird handle that's really not fun to drive. So I bought this J-Series J37 motor for $180 as a complete engine, but it had some problems. It catastrophically failed. And that's great for mock-up use. We actually mocked it up in our E30, and we figured out it just wasn't going to be a great fit. There wasn't enough height in the fender to fit the height of this engine. But this car, we've had this mocked up in here, and there's more than enough room. We'll probably use a P2R upper intake and several other parts from P2R. Big shout out to Sean Yearwood for a lot of help this last month, helping us figure out which engine to go chase and which modifications that we need to make it fit. And he understands that we're building around classes. Not everybody gets that. Not everybody cares. Like, oh, just strap turbos on it. We're not doing that. We don't want a $2,000 a day track car. I'd like to go out and make a set of tires last a whole season and just pay my entry fee and fuel and the bare minimum on consumables. I'd love to have a $300 or $400 time trial, and that includes the entry fee. This car should be able to do that. If we put a V8 in here, we're going to break axles and differentials and hubs, and it just starts snowballing, and your simple engine swap turns into a $50,000 or $60,000 swap. And that's what we tell people when they say, hey, I want a big V8 in an X or Y chassis. I'm like, cool, bring us 50 grand and we'll make it happen, and we'll make it a race car. Oh, you want a street car too? Then bring another 20 grand. You want air conditioning and heaters and all the street creature comforts for a street car? That's not what we're doing here. We're making a race car that will be 100% squeaky clean legal for SCCA Max 4. We're going to use an unmodified engine. Again, we can do intake manifold. One of the advantages of the J-Series is it has this monobrow single exhaust port on each side, so we don't have to make exhaust headers, which is our most expensive item on any of our swaps. The single most expensive item other than the engine transmission. The parts from us, the swap parts, are our headers. And they're a real pain in the butt to get made correctly and cost effectively. So this won't need headers. It'll need a little exhaust. It'll just dump out of that single port on each head. And I am really excited about that, not having to spend 40 to 60 hours making a prototype set of headers and then sending them off and going through a couple iterations of production, because this is something we'd like to support. So we could make this exhaust flange outlet thing very simply, and we're going to make this, the machined adapter for the bell housing for the Gen 2 J35, J37 to the RX-8 transmission. It'll have the right shifter location. It has the right torque capacity. The transmissions don't cost a ton. You can find a used one, $500, $600, $700. Just make sure you don't get the early ones because they have half the torque rating. And that's the ones that everybody knows. Oh, the RX-8 transmissions blow up. Yeah, the early ones do. 220 Newton meters versus 400. So the 09 to 11 RX-8 transmission, it makes sense for us. It fits this car. It fits this tunnel. It fits the starter. We can make it fit this engine. The flywheel and the clutch we already have here, the starter. We're really close to getting this thing bolted together and in the car. We're really excited. So hopefully that wasn't too long and boring, and thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check out our Agent 86, our little FRS here. We'll have forum build threads, we'll have our blog updates, we'll have our YouTube videos, and even some Facebook videos and pictures on Instagram. I'm too stupid to make videos work on Instagram. I'm just too old. Don't get me into TikToks. I can't do all that stuff. So yeah, we're going to document this really well. We've already got a build thread that we started in 2012 when we had our first BRZ. And so that's like, what, 13 years old? There's been read hundreds of thousands of times. And we document all of our tests and track tests. And we're going to go back to the track in this car soon. And we'll go back without aero with the J motor. And then we'll go back after we add the splitter in the wing. And then we'll just keep iterations and keep making the car as fast as we can. Hopefully we'll make it competitive in SCCA Time Trial. Maybe you'll see it at Time Trial Nationals next year if they go back to pit race. We'll haul the 20 hours up there to Pittsburgh and go to that, because I think the car should be competitive. It should make the minimum weight and make a decent amount of power, which is all you kind of build for. When we're building for a class, that's the goal. We want to run the most tire, the most aero, the least weight, and the most power that the class allows. And luckily, those are all attainable numbers. This is not an expensive engine swap. We'll have a $1,500 engine and a $500 transmission and not be stuck with the expense of this 700 horsepower to the wheels monster that breaks clutches and differentials, and it's expensive to run a high power car. So be careful what you wish for. In the words of Roger Penske, he told Mark Donohue back in the 70s, pick a class that you can build to go all the way to the limit for. And that's what we're doing. We're going to pull back from this money sink and get it into this car. We bought this car for like $9,000 back in 2016. It's a cheap car. It's a cheap, minivan engine, but it should be still pretty spicy. Adding 50% more power than this car came with from the factory, and the big tires and MCS suspension and all the crazy SPL arms. We'll have all of that and full aero. It should be a blast to drive, and I hope we're going to have 2 seats in the car because we want to give people rides in it all the time. Nobody wanted to ride in this Mustang. It was kind of, it's kind of a handful. I took 1 rider in the 4 years I've raced this car, and that was enough for him. He's like, okay, I've seen that. So this one will be a lot more fun and enjoyable and not as expensive. So that's the hope, at least. And the J-Swap is partly how we're getting there. Again, thanks to Sean Yearwood for his help, Adonis from the J-Swap page, Chris Coffey, and others that have done this swap before in other chassis, and they're helping us try to make a better swap for the 86 chassis. We've seen this done and we think we can improve on some of the things. We think the RX-8 transmission is a better fit for this chassis. You're not having to cut up the firewall or the subframe to make the starter fit. It just all works. We've already mocked it up. We already know that. So yeah, this should be pretty painless, and hopefully we have this car on track by the end of the year in 2025. Again, thanks for tuning in.